let's get ready, let's get ready, let's get ready to rumble. Get ready, get steady, and rumble. Now, we all love a good cry, don't we? Whether it be the bittersweet tears pulled from your eyes in a moment of triumph as a bunch of children stand on their desks and salute, "Oh Captain, my Captain." Or maybe the sniffles of growing up as you hear the words, "Elliot, I'll be right here." Or maybe the sobs of friendship and conclusion when a certain horse perishes in a swamp of its own sadness. Or possibly those warm optical drops of love and happiness as Shadow comes bounding over the hill, despite probably only having a couple of weeks left in the tank at best. There are countless different types of tears that can be evoked through the medium of film, and what floats one person's boat might obviously sail straight past another. You might be the kind of cat that weeps uncontrollably as Tommy and Brendan finally make amends. Tap out, Tommy. Or maybe you're the fight for justice type warrior who thrives on seeing goodness overcome in the likes of Philadelphia or A Time to Kill. Maybe romance is your bag. Maybe your idea of comfort is watching Leo freeze to death, or Noah and Ali taking a long nap together. Hell, maybe it's just the realities of life that hits you hardest. Blue Valentine, Manchester by the Sea, Broken Circle Breakdown. Everyone has their own story to sob to. But aren't these all just a little shallow? I mean, sure, they evoke some sort of unwitting physical reaction from you. They may pat themselves on the back and say, "Whoop, major seep." But really, surely that's just as easy a trick as making somebody jump in fright or laugh in delight. It's subjective, and it doesn't need to work for everyone. It just needs to work for some. Hell, a ratio of 3 out of 10 would probably be considered a success. But what about the movies that go deeper? The ones that aren't after your tears, they're after your soul. The ones that feed beneath the eye ducts. The ones that climb inside your skin and move your heart to a different beat. The ones that scar your brain or burn shadows on your thoughts like an atomic flash. The ones that bring with it a terrifying misery, scraping out your insides and boring into the pit of your stomach like a hydraulic fracturing pump, leaving behind the empty feeling of godlessness. Tears? Tears are for wimps. We want everything you've ever had. So, I spent the last few weeks watching a lot of these. If you look closely, you might see the flicker of the person I used to be. But before I compiled this list of frankly exhaustingly depressing movies, I did have a stipulation. The sole subject of the movie could not be the overriding reason to include it. We must investigate further than that to really understand a movie's power. For example, the Holocaust is clearly one of the, if not the most horrendous act ever committed by humanity. So therefore, on a purely narrative level, Schindler's List has to be in. However, although thoroughly heartbreaking in places, Steven Spielberg does ask us to find slight redemption in the heroic acts of Oskar Schindler. He also does that rather patronising thing with the red dress. So, as a whole, that movie can get in the bin. The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas likewise. However, here, by placing us on the other side of the fence, the movie flirts dangerously with asking us to sympathise with a Nazi family. Even perhaps positing the idea that the finale might serve as some sort of justice for the murder of over 6 million people. Which is frankly unforgivable, so off you trot, get in the bin. The themes within the movie could not solely dictate an audience's emotions towards it. There must be something more. For example, the emotional destruction of one life could quite easily be presented as more horrifying than the physical destruction of another. There are a multitude of facets and mechanics to consider. So, if you've never had the inclination to drape a piece of wilted despair over a burnt crumpet, underneath the tormented chicken's ovulation, and covering it with an ooze of mustard-coated desolation and desperation, then maybe this breakfast is not for you. So, here we go. The top 5 most depressing movies of all time. Yeah, I'm going to need the whiskey. Yeah. Number 5. Irreversible. The fact that a movie that opens with the hugely graphic annihilation of a person's skull and features within it a gut-wrenching, seemingly endless, unflinching portrayal of horrendous sexual abuse is only at number 5 here might indicate quite how close to the depths of hell and humanity we are inversely flying.
Tu veux que je te lise? Le temps détruit tout. Je viens de penser à ça, tiens.
Qu'est-ce qui t'est arrivé?
Ouf. Moi, je vais te le dire. Je fais de la tôle parce que... j'ai couché avec ma fille.
Ah, le syndrome occidental.
Directed by Gaspar Noé and starring Vincent Cassel and Monica Bellucci. This caused quite a stir upon its debut at the 2002 Cannes Film Festival, prompting rather understandable walkouts and, by all accounts, spontaneous vomiting, brought about by not only the incredible difficult themes and imagery, but also the use of low-frequency sounds that accompany roughly 60 minutes of the movie, with the deliberate aim to create a sense of nausea and anxiety within the audience. This is the perfect example of the social nihilism elements of the new French extremity movement that emerged at the beginning of the 21st century, alongside such other titles as Baisse Moi and Haute Tension, or High Tension, or Switchblade Romance, depending on where you're watching it, recalling the extreme cinema movement of the early to mid-1970s, which included such films as Salo 120 Days of Sodom, Last House on the Left, and In the Realm of the Senses. Irreversible is desperate in its search for depravity. It is unrelenting in its pursuit of degradation. The story follows the narrative of classic revenge thriller, but it's presented to us in reverse order, forcing us to watch the act of vengeance before we see what led to it. Hiding the reason for such a horrifically violent act makes us question how perverse the seemingly inevitable ability to lose our sense of humanity and societal morals truly is, and questions, does every action truly have an equal and opposite reaction? Seeing how cruel and inhumane the reaction is first is a terrifying conceit, as we are left to imagine how utterly appalling the act that led to it must have been. And if you're looking for balanced reasoning here, well, you might well not be disappointed. Horrified, disgusted, revolted. Yep, yeah, this film is pretty repulsive. It has its merits though, and if you are looking to see something that will stir you in a way that possibly you never have been before, you might need look no further. But really, we've only just begun. 4. Dancer in the Dark. Well, it wasn't going to be a list of depressing movies without including the oft-proclaimed king of misery Lars von Trier, was it? Surprisingly though, however, I find his most miserable piece, that's not necessarily negative by the way, to come not from his self-titled Depression trilogy, but actually from his earlier Golden Hearts trilogy. Now, I'm not saying that the trio of Antichrist, Melancholia and Nymphomaniac are a barrel of laughs by comparison. They most certainly aren't. But I would have to argue that all 3 movies in the Golden Hearts trilogy, The Idiot, Breaking the Waves and this, Dancer in the Dark, are actually more bleak. There is a truer level of realism within these movies that emotes easier with the audience, where Antichrist and Melancholia in particular plump for surrealism and fantasy to investigate Lars von Trier's visions of psychosis and eschatology. Breaking the Waves and Dancer in the Dark places its trust solely in the hands of authenticity and the human touch. Real people, real lives, real fucking pain.
Raindrops and roses and whiskers on kittens.
Dancer in the Dark, released in 2000, tells the story of factory worker Selma Jezkova, played by Bjork, who is battling against the clock in order to save enough money to pay for an operation to save her child's eyesight. And the clock she is competing against is the very same degenerative eye condition that her son will soon suffer from. Within the confines of the world that Lars von Trier has presented us with here, the diminutive Bjork looks positively minuscule. The factory she works in looks Goliath in comparison. And Peter Stormare, who plays Jeff, Selma's not-so-secret admirer, towers over her with innocent power. It is this technique of making Bjork look as tiny as possible that really resonates with the audience. The strength she possesses to carry on and battle throughout, seemingly at complete odds with her physical presence. Her delicate tones, the innocence she exudes as she sings, her almost childlike captivation with golden era musicals, the tiny trailer at the end of the garden in which she keeps her entire world, all serve as complete contrast to the struggle that she is up against. As knockback after knockback is laid across her path, we finally start to realise that possibly this is a battle she is never going to win. And towards the end, with her eyesight all but gone, Lars von Trier opts to metaphorically take away her sense of touch and sound as he isolates her from a world that has undeniably treated her so cruelly. There is little respite here. There is scant regard for optimism. Even the possible near final act of redemption is presented dubiously. So we are left unsure as to, well, if any of it was ever worth it. Is this a life? Was this a life worth living? And if a life isn't considered to be worth living, is it even a life lost? The reverberating message probably comes from Bjork's character herself, as she sings, with the help of the poster boy of gloom, Radiohead's Tom York, the words, "To be honest, I really don't care." Fucking hell. 3. Requiem for a Dream. Christ. The early 2000s were a bit miserable, weren't they? Was this a Y2K hangover? Did everyone writing in 1999 really and genuinely believe that the world was tumbling to its conclusion? Another movie released in 2000. The reputation of Requiem for a Dream precedes it. And for pretty good reason. There isn't really much more to add to the reports that this movie is so crushingly disheartening, unrelentingly morbid and overwhelmingly wretched that to watch it more than once would indicate some sort of predilection towards sadomasochism. Much of the movie washed in this morgue blue hue, this really does deal with the absolute horrors of modern society. Well, at least the sun's out. From psychotic breakdowns to drug-addled teens to enforced prostitution. It's all there in its hollow horridness. The fact that it also stars a Wayans brother really does highlight its detachment from a world that you would actually like to live in.
You alright? So, Mrs. Goldfarb, we've tried several medications and you don't seem to be responding. I believe we might be at a point where we might want to try some alternative methods. We've had excellent results with ECT in the past. So if I can just get your John Hancock, we'll get underway. Great, thanks.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Somebody help us.
I need a doctor, man.
My friend is sick. Need some help, please.
I can't take
Somebody
it,
help
man.
us.
My arm! My fucking arm!
Just hang the fucking...
No, man!
Help us! Somebody fucking help us, please!
Directed by Darren Aronofsky, no stranger to psychological horror, following his Lynchian debut Pi, and boasting an Oscar-nominated performance by Ellen Bernstein, this uncompromisingly grim tale of addiction and the desperation it marries is a chilly dose of desolation mainlined straight to your soul. Employing brutalising rapid editing which whips its audience up into the adrenaline-fuelled lives of its main players, allowing no one any opportunity to disembark before it comes to its crashing finale. It's one hell of a ride, like an emotional fairground attraction with the honest-to-God chance of mutilation. Warning, following viewing, just listening to a few bars of Clint Mansell's theme Lux Eterna will probably send you spiralling into a pit of self-judgment and hate for the rest of your life. Oh, God. Sorry. Got lost thinking about it. Number 2. The War Zone. Is it any surprise that this is Tim Roth's first and only directorial outing? No, it's not. Who on earth in their right mind would allow this absolute monster to be at the helm of something else? And what could he possibly want to achieve that he didn't with this? Surely he's got nothing left to say. This is like one act away from a bona fide snuff movie. Yeah, okay, I mean that one act is kind of like the act of murder, but still, it's horrible. If part of you isn't dead after watching this, then I really wonder whether any of you was alive to begin with. From the outset, you know that you are in the kingdom of bleak, as the classic grey skies of England pour down upon a desolate countryside home, one long since ravished by the elements of this unforgiving isle. Tilda Swinton, on the verge of giving birth, glugs on some red wine as she bathes her husband, the unnerving Ray Winston. I mean, what is it with Ray? He's got this really soft, high-pitched tone which can come across really gentle, and then at other points, just terrifying. Within moments, we are embroiled in a rather realistic car crash, and the setting is moved from what apparently is the most isolated house in England to what is in fact always the most vacuous place on earth. An underfunded British hospital in the middle of the night. From there, we are battered and bruised like the cliff edges of the stormy Devonshire coast. Any trust we have in family unity or paternal love or sibling boundaries or maternal protection or just slight plain goodness is battered from our hearts. I mean, fuck the saying it's grim up north, it's frickin' godforsaken down south. Look, I really can't put into words how truly ruining this movie is. If there's no better example of the depression on show here, it's that Tim Roth has placed us in a world where there is only one pub and it doesn't play any music.
Want a drink?
No. This is my little brother.
Hello.
We're going to the beach.
I'll come.
Alright, but you'll have to ask Mum and Dad.
Why?
Why do you think? Come on. This is Nick.
Hello. Hello, son.
Hello, Nick.
No.
We're going to the beach.
It's a bit late, huh?
You driving, are you, Nick?
Yeah.
That's your first, is it?
Yeah. Can I go?
Will you bring them home?
Of course.
Just the deafening sounds of anguish, despair, spite and sexual destruction to accompany the family night out. And as the movie comes to its painful conclusion, we are left with the main victim weeping uncontrollably in the corner as the two men fight for dominance. One having taken her innocence, trust and ability to love, and the other apparently having blamed her for it. I mean, this movie does end, so that's good. But with no parting wishes, not even a cursory head nod. It just simply leaves us. It's ruined the dinner party, it's thrown up in the fish tank, it's punched the host and it's poisoned the dog. And it's left the door open on the way out, into the night. Mercifully, never to be seen again. Oh, but the impact will remain. Plus, it's left you bloody freezing. Someone shut the door. Number 1. Come and See. Now at the start I highlighted the need for a movie not to be driven by subject only. But what if there was a movie that married real historical atrocities with startling imagery, horrific honesty, raw passion and pure realism? Well then people, I think we then may have found the most depressing movie of all time. Yeah. And what makes this movie more than just morbidly curious is its vital importance. The mastery of storytelling on here is quite frankly breathtaking. Now, I have previously done an in-depth review of this for the quite excellent Cool Kids Film Club, and I'll be dropping a link to that in the comments or the description below. Therefore, I don't think I can fully re-articulate quite how incredible this movie is, nor describe again the crushing emotional battering that it will inflict upon its viewer. Suffice to say, I have never seen a movie quite like this before. It is relentless in its quest for your very being. Its increasing persistence to have you understand the true atrocities of war is gut-wrenching. And if there has been a more realistic depiction of genocide, well, I'm yet to see it. Elem Klimov's masterpiece is easily one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a movie that depicts survival as so abhorrent you truly might understand how the living could envy the dead. It destroys any notion that by simply learning from the past, we can somehow undo the horrors of history. History cannot be rolled back. History cannot be forgotten. History is a scar on every being born into this world for eternity. And this film holds its rightful place upon a stitch. You might not want to watch this film, much like you might not want to visit Auschwitz, but the very fact that they exist is what is important. This is visceral, it's vital, and it's utterly devastating. You will never forget this film. Well, that was a fun time had by all, wasn't it? I'm off to put my eyes into a blender. But before I do that, I did want to title drop another few movies that did narrowly miss the top 5. There's the utterly incredible Grave of the Fireflies, which is probably the most harrowing animated feature ever, save of course for Watership Down. It is also one of the most incredible war movies in existence. Shout out to Lilia Forever, The Machinist and Happiness, which is anything but. Paddy Considine gets 2 nods for his directorial debut Tyrannosaur, and of course the Shane Meadows cult classic Dead Man's Shoes. And another 2 more for Ray Winston as well, with Scum and Nil by Mouth. And Kess, bloody Kess. It really is grim up north, isn't it? Feel free to add any suggestions that you might have to the comments below. However, I fear I may be on a strict Paul Rudd only diet for the foreseeable future. Laters. Mid-credit scene. Thank you very much for popping by. Like, comment and subscribe to the channel. That way you can get all the updates. You can also catch me on the Cool Kids Film Club. They can be found on Facebook under the title Cool Kids Film Club, and on YouTube and on Spotify as well. If you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, general musings, why not catch me on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter? Some people will ask why I did this. Well, simply, she gave me a pen.